Okay, that'll do. Hi.
Awesome. Oh, kia ora and welcome, Naomi. Thank you so much for taking the time out to speak with me today about play and the top party.
Yes,
I guess probably one of the first questions that I always like to ask people is, do you have a favourite play memory that you would like to share?
I do. So I grew up on a dairy farm just out of Hamilton. And we had just a very, very small kind of area of native bush just down the hill from the house. And we used to go down there a lot and climb trees and play in the teeny weeny stream that was there and get all dirty. And I had an older brother, and we used to play cops and robbers, but he used to always make me be the robber. So he used to chase me all around the bush. So that wasn't such a favorite part of the memory, but yes, being in the bush, climbing trees, and I still climb trees with I've got 3 young boys, so I still climb trees with them today. So it's fun.
Brilliant. And you're running in for the Hamilton West electorate for the Opportunities Party. And I know the Opportunities Party, or TOP, is still a bit of a relatively new party or a newcomer. So I thought maybe perhaps you could just give us a little bit of a rundown and background about the Opportunity Party.
Yes. So we were established in 2017 out of kind of a think tank. So we're very much a party that follows the evidence and the expert-led advice. And across the board, we say, if there's, these wonderful reports that come out that provide really good advice and recommendations to politicians, and we're the party that says, okay, so let's do that then. So we want to sit in between National and Labour and kind of put an end to the constant bickering and flip-flop that keeps going on that creates so much inefficiency in our society. And we want to with the visionary party that want to lead the way forwards, thinking about future generations and always considering the evidence and the science.
Oh, fantastic. Thank you for sharing that. And I think, you talk about, following those reports and insights. And I guess one of the reports and insights that I wanted to talk about today was obviously the United Nations Rights of the Child, Article 31 and General Comment 17. So do you and your party have a good understanding about Aotearoa's commitment to Article 31 and the child's right to play?
Yes, we do. So the way that I understand it, Article 31 incorporates rest and leisure and play and recreation and arts and culture at an age-appropriate stage, and the child's right to all of those things. And then the general comment enshrines the play aspect of that into law. So yeah, absolutely. This is something that the Opportunities Party advocates for and has been for quite some time. Early childhood education, for example, is proven to be where the greatest impact lies. So we want to reorient that towards community and enable parents to have choice by putting the money straight into their pockets, and kind of giving children a sense of variety in their life within the security of warm reciprocal relationships. And play is a massive, massive part of that. We want to see more ECE teachers in schools, for example, because ECE teachers, we think, have, a greater knowledge around play and part of their training. Bringing that more into schoolings and that pedagogy and that philosophy and that understanding of the way that children learn, and that when learning is authentic and, a bit more sort of free flow and child-led interest, then it sinks deeper into their memory banks. And so knowledge, when knowledge is contextualized, we understand it more. So, and play is a massive part of that. So absolutely, we are big advocates for play-based learning, but in a facilitated way that is proven and deliberate. In schooling, it's sometimes people complain that they think that the children are just having a free-for-all, and that's not the sort of the teaching pedagogy that we understand.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think one of the other things, and I think you kind of answered this already about your party's commitment to Article 31 and the child's right to play in that ECE and that learning and education sector. But what's your party's commitment to it in other sectors that, fall back into local government, like, our parks and rec space, our,
Yes.
the transport industry, what's your thoughts and vision there?
Yeah, so we are a party that definitely advocates for child-friendly cities, for livable cities, for places where people can live and work and play within, within their community. We're very community-oriented. We're all about empowering communities to make the decisions that they need, because we live in quite a very diverse country. So yeah, we advocate for livable cities. And so what we want to do is return all GST on new developments back to local governments, but require them to invest that in infrastructure. Now, that's both above and below ground. We've heard that there's an issue with Three Waters. We all know about that. That needs investment for density to work well, but also the above ground infrastructure, walkways, cycleways, parks, recreation areas, and forms of active and public transport is something that we advocate for huge. And we have a number of policies. We've got the teal card, which is like a gold card for youth. So 0 to 18-year-olds get free access to public transport. There's some other things in there around healthcare. We would give $1,500 rebate back to anyone under 30 who has who buys an e-scooter or an e-bike. Sorry, did I say 18? I said the teal card's up to 30 years old.
Oh wow.
Yeah, sorry, 0 to 30. But the 18-year-olds get a savings boost of $5,000 when they turn 18, if they attend 2 weeks of civic duty. So, we've got a whole lot of stuff in there for youth. But in terms of play, absolutely. Livable cities, cycleways, walkways, reducing congestion, obviously still having the option to drive. We're not a sort of a regulatory kind of place a blanket regulation across everybody and that will solve the problem type party. We're more about empowering communities to make decisions for what works for them.
And that's great. You talk about, that returning that GST, so it goes back into infrastructure to help facilitate these different things for our communities. One thing we do know is that currently the play sector is obviously funded by Sport New Zealand, which is the Crown entity, and, it's divvied up between sport, rec and play. Where does your party sit in ensuring that adequate and fair budget provisions are in place for the play sector? How would your party then, advocate and work towards, right, this is how the money should be divvied up so everyone's got a chance?
Yes, I saw in one of your questions that it says that play is the child to sports and recreation. The younger sibling is what you've said.
Yeah.
And
very much so.
we would switch that around. We see play as the older sibling and sports and recreation as a part of that, because when children play sports, they're still being directed by adults about what to do, when to do it, all of that sort of thing. So it is a valuable part of child development. We like, children need to learn to be part of a team and work collaboratively with others and rely upon others and be relied upon as part of a sports team. But, play overarches that, because there's so much more to play than just sports and recreation. There's the concept of children being able, being safe and being able to mobilize, to move around their communities in a more of a free flow way. So back to your question around budgeting, this kind of, if we take a step back, it kind of relates to our living standards framework, right? So the world is looking at New Zealand going, yes, you've got well-being, you've got living standard framework, you're prioritizing that, but there's nothing that makes the budget then align with those living standards framework. So when the government does its budgeting, they're not having to, there's nothing that requires them to budget under the living standards framework. So taking a step back, the Opportunities Party is advocating for an anti-corruption commission. So we are concerned about some of the budgetary decisions that are being made in Parliament and what the reasons are for those. And so that's one thing we're doing. And then in terms specifically of sports and recreation, we would be reviewing that and making sure that the play aspect of it sort of overarches, and sports and recreation sits within that. Does that make sense?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, I really like your analogy there, talking about making, play the overarching, because it does filter down. Play is never in isolation, and it's one of the things, if you look into research from around the world, it's one of the hardest things to actually put a definition to, and you can't, because there's so many different aspects to it. And after all, play is the work of children, and it's like, well, sport has got that direction to it. Same with recreation, and we're more about that free play, the child's right to have, do it their way. And so it's nice to think about having that over, play becoming, that older sibling, and then the other two filtering underneath. But how would you propose? That's a big shift in thinking for not only the sector, but a lot of people that work within it. So how would you approach that?
I think the number one thing is that we need safer cities, and we need parents to feel that their children are safe to go out and play with others in a way that suits them, and that they don't need to stay on their section with their siblings. So safer cities is a big part of that. And I guess we're a party, the Opportunities Party, there's a lot of things that we can do to tinker at the edges of our various problems that we have in our society. But when we come across, when we sort of put out one-liner PR policy type statements with nothing underneath it, then that's problematic, and that has been done by both parties for quite a long time. So the Opportunities Party is a party that looks at the fundamentals of a problem. What is fundamentally restricting, where we want to go across a variety of issues. And so for this one, giving parents, or having parents feel that their child will be safe in livable, safe cities. So for example, we want to we want to get community policing back. We want to have community policing kiosks. We want police to know their communities and to know where the support is needed. We believe in wraparound service type, safe social justice for families. So it's quite big. But to answer your specific question, how to prioritize play in the system, I think it's a matter of awareness building, and we have been advocating for this for quite a long time. But as you said at the start, not a lot of people have heard of the Opportunities Party, and I guess this is part of my role, is to chat to people like you. I was at the Longworth Education conference back in January. I was one of the presenters. I run a charity called STEM Curiosity, where we take basically messy play into schools under the terminology sensory science. So the kids have a great time with that. But yeah, so I definitely am across this kind of conversation, and it's just a matter of, I think, raising the awareness, having these conversations and expanding them outwards, but also understanding that there are some fundamental issues that we need to address. So livable cities, funding for councils, safe cities, parents understanding the need for free play, but then also feeling safe to allow their children to do that.
Absolutely. And I think there are still, even in today's society, we still have barriers to play, which we'd like to think they don't exist, but they do. And I think there is that big education piece and awareness, as you put it, and bringing that to communities about, the children having that opportunity to have that free play, which kind of leads me through to that next question, is that, play is still within that sport portfolio. We've been lumped in there with recreation. In your opinion, through the party, should it have its own portfolio?
I mean, as I said before, I think there is some connection between the two. I think I think play and recreation and sport need to be working together. I wouldn't separate them out, but I would definitely prioritize play within that. One of the things that we are proposing is to establish a ministry for children. So that's a ministry for children from conception to 18, whose remit is to ensure that every child has a life well lived. Now, we do kind of have a ministry for children, but at the moment it's focused on, the very disadvantaged. And so I guess whether it's within that structure or separate, but we see that we need a ministry that is across all of the others, a liaison kind of role between education and healthcare and, social services and organizations and NGOs, and is understanding the needs of putting the needs of the child first, and prioritizing that in our decision making. Over in Wales, they have an active parliament and a commission, Future Generations Commission. So we're also advocating for a Future Generations Commission, and that active parliament over there and commission associated with it requires every single decision that is made in parliament to consider future generations. And when you do that, you make very different decisions. You don't put all your budget into new roading, for example, to attract more cars and more congestion. So when we look at things from a child-centered or play-centered or child-friendly centered or future generations perspective, we make better decisions. So that's kind of something that we're advocating for.
Yeah, that's interesting, because back in 2002, the Welsh government actually implemented their national play policy, which is quite different from a strategy. So here in Aotearoa, we've got a national strategy that was developed by Sport New Zealand, but we don't have a national policy. And we know when we look to overseas for the examples like Play England and Wales, who have worked closely with other examples like Play Wales and Play England, they've all worked together to develop these national policies, which have had that significant benefit for those communities. What's your party's position on developing a national play policy for Aotearoa?
Yeah, so we would support the development of a national play policy, but I think the way that the Opportunities Party works is that we tend to look around the world, see what's working really well, where are the best practice examples, and then apply that to the New Zealand context, which is quite unique. We've got a super diverse, it's called super diverse culture. We've got over 200 ethnicities in New Zealand who speak over 150 languages. And we are obviously grounded in Te Tiriti o Waitangi. And so, we would look around the world to see what's working well, but then we would adjust that for the New Zealand context. But by all means, a national play strategy that incorporates the voices of the experts. And by experts, I don't just mean academia. I mean people on the ground like yourselves and Longworth Education and some of those other, UCE teachers, are people with knowledge on the ground, and communities and community voices to make sure that it's going to work for everybody.
Absolutely. And I think this kind of goes in because it is very much, we are a very multicultural and inclusive society down here. And I think when you start to look at a national policy, you have to start looking, across the sectors, because it's not a standalone thing that can be developed. You've got to look at mana whenua, bring them into it. What are our other communities we need to incorporate? So I guess the next question is, who are some of the agencies your party would want to consult as part of that development of a national policy?
Play Aotearoa. Play Centre. I think the Play Centre Federation have good knowledge of their communities. Unfortunately, they've been underfunded for decades, so it's another aspect that I sort of side issue that needs addressing. I think local government New Zealand, because they're going to be sort of integral to the provision of the infrastructure. Iwi, absolutely. We're a party that is very inclusive, so voices that have an interest, by all means we'd listen to. I think we have to be careful that it doesn't become some sort of corporatized neoliberal, or any kind of blanket regulatory approach. It's got to work for communities. That's the most important thing.
Yeah, it's a very fine line to find that balance. And I think you mentioned about, you're talking about local government there and then support to make that happen. How would you support local councils to implement a national pay policy? We know of councils, as soon as they see something new, it's dollar figures, it's another expense they have to kind of allow and accommodate for. So what support would you give local council to implement a national pay policy?
I mean, I think there are really good examples that are already underway. So I know Christchurch, they have a play advocate person on there. I don't know if she's on the council or within the council, but she's doing a great job. There's one here in Hamilton City Council as well. There's, I'm not aware of where they all are, but I'm sure there's one in Auckland. And so giving those people a little bit more voice, and just, again, it comes back to understanding, doesn't it? And educating our counsellors and providing that funding through the GST return of new development, requiring them to spend it on infrastructure. And then the national place strategy would lead into, how that money could effectively be spent for developing livable, child-friendly cities. So I think a lot of it's got to do with a lack of awareness and a lack of understanding of, kind of like what's the best way. Like here in Hamilton, for example, we've invested heaps of money into destination playgrounds, right? So we've got these big destination playgrounds around the place, which are great. And that, the kids have fun there and they've been well designed and they're awesome. But what about all the suburbs where children can't get there? What about all the children whose parents can't get in a car and drive to the destination playground? And so we're a very inclusive party, and we want all children to have opportunity to play. And it doesn't have to be expensive, massive destination playgrounds. Children actually don't need that much to have a wonderful free play interaction with each other. And it doesn't have to be structured, and there's talk about loose parts play. I mean, how that would work in a community, I don't know, but there's probably examples where it does. I'm no sort of expert on design, but I know there are plenty of them out there. Tim Gill, Urban Playground book, shout out to that. Yeah. So, sorry, I forgot your question. I tend to go pointing on off topic or on topic, but sideways.
No, I think you've nailed it there in terms of which is kind of going to give me a two-part question here, because one, you talk about obviously that awareness piece, and obviously one of our biggest concerns is that there is a lack of recognition and an understanding of the importance of play on Aotearoa. And I guess my first question there is, what are your plans to help raise that platform for play to ensure that it is seen as equal, with the other counterparts of sport and rec?
Yeah, so I think public awareness, you can run public awareness kind of campaigns, but I think also it comes back to, and as again, we look at the fundamentals, right? We don't just tinker at the edges and go, one public awareness campaign is going to solve this problem. We're looking at the fundamentals. What's the fundamental of this problem? I think there's an increasing lack of integration at the early childhood and the early childhood years between the knowledge that teachers hold in terms of child development in those early years and the knowledge that parents hold, or the connection between early childhood centres and parents. Now, don't get me wrong, there are plenty of centres who are doing a wonderful job incorporating their and having conversations with the parents or incorporating the community into their early childhood. Some of them are very community oriented, and that's great. And we have a variety of early childhood education services in New Zealand, which is also great. We don't want to just go down one path, which we are. Corporatization is not good for the children, but there is still a variety. And so we see it. We want to reorient that early childhood education service to community and involve the parents. And because ECE has the power to grow whole communities, and that's that can look in a lot of different ways, and there are lots of examples of integration points and where it works again for the community, right? So some of them might, some of them run courses, or some of them invite the parents in to be a part of the day, or there's a whole lot of different ways to do it. But really we want parents understanding, through their early childhood services, the importance of child-led play and as an integral part of their development. So I guess, and so we've got a number of policies around that. So for example, we would implement quality-based contracting. So we've had quite a push in recent years for participation in ECE, but the quality has been sort of left to the side. So ratios, a space to run around and play, group size, which relates to the connection between the teachers and the children and the relationship building. So there's a lot to change there, but we think we follow the ECE reform advice, which is Dr. Mike Bedford. I don't know if you're aware of him. He's sort of, him. Okay, cool. Don't need to explain him then. So he's sort of advocating for quality-based contracting, so that requires the government to choose services that are quality. And that services can only grow and open more centres if they are quality services. So shifting that, we've got lots. I don't know how much you want me to go on, but that's kind of where that knowledge of the importance of play starts, right? And then obviously I follow Nathan Wallace as well, and he talks about the teenage years where the brain sort of shuts down and goes into renovation phase. I haven't got teenagers yet, but I've got 3 boys, so I'm looking I'm looking ahead and going, oh, what's it going to be like? But and they return to their sort of social emotional brain, and so and there's lots of research around play therapy as well. So engaging those teenagers back into their playful mindsets, that could be given a lot of attention. And then even for adults, right? Like when we go and play, when we go on holiday, we feel relaxed. When we do the things that we enjoy, bushwalks, whatever, if we play with our kids, it's such a fulfilling experience. And even if we don't have kids, we play with our nephews and nieces, or we play with each other when we go out and have fun with our friends. It's really therapeutic. So I do agree that right across the spectrum, we do need a much better awareness of the benefits of play.
Well, thank you for sharing that. We very much agree that we do need, not just from birth, but right up to being an adult, because that transition into an adulthood, we often forget, we become serious and we forget about the importance that we need to still have play and fun in our life as well. But I want to back up a bit before, in your previous answer, you talk about, being inclusive for everybody. And, you also mentioned about, the playgrounds and that. And one of the things that we see is that some of our most vulnerable children, ones with disabilities and disadvantages, can't use playgrounds in our local communities because they're not fit for purpose. They're no good for a wheelchair user, as an example. So what's your approach to getting our local councils to have more inclusive play experiences and play spaces for all children, including ones that have physical disabilities?
That's right. I think, all children deserve the opportunity to play, and to play freely, and to play in the way that they want to play. And that includes children with physical disabilities, neurodiverse children. That's an increasing sort of challenge that we're finding. Everyone, all children. And so, yes, absolutely, local councils, local councils should be providing for that. I think, to be fair to local councils, they've had decades of underfunding. And again, being the party that steps back and looks at the fundamentals of a problem, right? So we talk about how National and Labour argue about what colour to paint the kitchen, and we are talking about the cracking foundations of the house, okay? So in this context, the funding for local government to provide play opportunities for children with various challenges, the underfunding. What's the problem there? Okay, so we have an economy that is not working well. Okay, so our economy is quite stagnant. It's not sort of circulating well. When an economy is circulating well, money flows out around, and some of that flows through the taxes, which the government then has opportunity to spend. And there's a side issue here that central government generally doesn't trust local government to spend its money in the way that it should. So there's that as well, the next fixing. But in terms of the economy, why is our economy not circulating well? Because we put most of our wealth into housing, and housing is a very stagnant investment in terms of it doesn't create jobs or exports or it's not productive. So it's not producing anything. It's quite stagnant. It just sits there. And so when we put all our money into housing, that has and over decades, that has a detrimental effect to our circulating economy. And so what do we need to do? We need to shift. And this is nothing about should people own their own homes, right? And actually we've locked a whole generation out of the possibility of owning their own homes unless they get parental support. Side issue. But what should we do? We should shift some of that massive wealth, right? The super investors, the people who are investing in heaps of properties. We should shift that towards encouraging them to invest in things that are productive. So businesses or, things that will create jobs and exports, or the productive, innovative kind of, maybe the green economy, or just innovation and technology and things that are going to be more productive. How do we make them shift that? We apply a very small tax to the land under which those houses sit. So a very small land tax, 0.75%, so 0.75% annualized tax on land, residential land. So we're not talking about commercial because that's quite productive already. We're not talking about rural because that's productive. They're producing exports. So the residential urban land that is just sitting there. So it sort of disincentivizes land banking. Treating land like a bank, which, we have issues, say, for example, the North Shore, but all over the place. We've got a whole lot of empty houses. We talk about this housing shortage, well, there's actually empty houses. People aren't bothering to tenant their houses because they're just relying on the capital gains. And we've got one of the most unaffordable housing market in the world. So shifting a bit of that over to productive economy, then that sort of just starts the wheels turning. We don't want to crash the housing market. Got to do it very carefully. Start the wheels turning of getting people to invest, and we will, and the money that we get from that tax, we will apply to income earners, so they will pay less tax. So first $15,000 that everybody earns would become tax free. So that helps the low income earners, but helps everybody. So there's sort of that. So it's not a gain for the government. We're not taking money. We're putting it into tax breaks for salary and wage earners who pay the vast majority of our taxes. So anyway, so that enables then the economy to start circulating when we're investing in productive things, and that makes money flow back out to the government then, who can then has the opportunity to then spend in these areas where we want them to spend. So, you'll hear, we can have a national play strategy, yes, and we can educate people, yes, by all means, that's important, and so that people are making the right decisions on where to spend their money. But the fundamental challenge that we have is this quite stagnant economy that's been sort of occurring over decades, and we need to shift that to enable the money to flow in the directions that we all want to see it traveling.
I'm going to take a real sidestep question here and go back to asking about your super investors and getting them to, this isn't a play related question, sorry, but it has sparked my interest here. So I'm going to ask, I'm down here in Dunedin at the moment, but I'm a strongly rooted grassroots back in West Auckland, okay, a very strong fruit and farming community, wine growers, very strong Croatian community. And I know a lot of farmers out in the West Auckland community now, because of the changes in terms of the resource management, can't sell off their land to development, but it's no longer good for production of fruit, and they're paying full taxes on it. So are you proposing another tax on top of that for them, because they can't sell, they're not land banking, but they're not producing anything on it? So is it another tax they'd have to pay? Because they're stuck in between a rock and a hard place right now, these West Aucklanders, because they can't subdivide, they can't do anything, but it's been in the family, for example, maybe 6 generations. And, you know,
so why can't they produce off that land? What's wrong with the land for production?
Have you seen the farming community? It's hard to make money off now these days. You know, they're competing with a lot of imports that are coming in from overseas. So the money's not where it used to be, unless you're a big time commercial fruit or production exporter going through Turners and Growers or something like that. So it's not where it was for the smaller farmers, how it was back in the early, you know, in the 90s when I was a child. It was a much different growing community. So now, and a lot of these, you know, they're should be retired, or, you know, coming close to retirement. Children have gone off into other areas, so there's nothing to do with that land. You know, it's not being produced, it's just laying barren, because if they put into a crop, for example, there's more taxes on it. Your 60s and 70s, they shouldn't be. They've done their time, they've worked the land, but they can't sell it because it can't be developed under various rules. So what do they're not land banking, they just can't do anything with it.
So let's talk about that. I guess I'm not familiar with West Auckland as such. I am familiar with places like Pōkeno, right? So that used to be big farming community. It's now, you know, a whole lot of concrete and asphalt over it. Some of our most productive soil in this nation. Some of the most productive soil. And then people are hopping in cars and commuting all the way to Auckland, and emissions, right? So the concept of city sprawl is not conducive to a well society going forwards. And it's not helping with our emissions reductions. And it's, you know, it's just not a good model to follow anymore, because, you know, we're under this climate crisis, etc. So we need to rethink the way that we design our cities and make them livable and enjoyable living spaces for the communities that live within them. So city sprawl is not the answer. So I would agree that those, you know, the outskirts of the cities, we don't want that land to then, you know, be developed and developed and developed ad infinitum. In terms of, it sounds to me like kind of lifestyle block size properties, maybe. So less of the farms and more of the lifestyle blocks. And we have a lot of those surrounding Hamilton as well. So you've got the city, then you've got a whole lot of lifestyle blocks, and then you've got, you know, farmland over the Waipa or the Waikato or Hauraki Plains, etc. So what should we do there? Okay, because some of those lifestyle blocks, not these ones in West Auckland by the sounds of it, because they're bigger, but some of those lifestyle blocks, you just got people mowing the lawns, you know. Some of them are bigger, but too small to be productive. So, you know, but if we think, you know, future generations, what do we want future generations to have access to? We want them to have access to food. You know, so maybe there is more of a market for local food production in the surrounds of our cities, and that some of that food production might be utilised for restaurants and supermarkets. I think New World are currently, they've got a thing going where they're looking for more local suppliers to supply the supermarket. Farmers markets, there's always going to be value in harvesting. You might have some aspects of it that are available for people to come and harvest themselves, like you go and pick your own strawberries. And it might be also an aspect of, you know, donating stuff to food banks for the communities that are really struggling. So there are different ways to think about how to use our land. The Opportunities Party has, for example, we want to invest, we want to start up a sort of a biodiversity credit scheme, a national biodiversity credit scheme, so that so that and again, I don't know if this is West Auckland, but for example, farmers who have erodible land that is eroding and creating sediment in our waterways, which then has other flow-on effects. Planting that out in natives, because we know that exotic pine is not good for biodiversity, and we've seen the impacts of that through Cyclone Gabrielle. So planting that out in natives, but then having credits, having biodiversity credits given to them, making money out of that approach. Because we also know that biodiversity is so we've got 9 planetary boundaries. Climate change is one of them. We're overshooting 6 of them, and biodiversity is one of them. So we need to be investing in our biodiversity. So there's lots of other ways we can talk about these spaces other than just more city sprawl, which is not, it doesn't create livable spaces for people that are safe and enjoyable. We can do better. We can do much better with our city design.
No, thank you for going into that. It's an interesting, I'm quite passionate about the West Auckland community and the farming community. And I think that's often a lot of people think that, they're making a good return on money, and for time, what comes from the land to the table, the farmer's not getting that profit. And then, when it comes to their retirement and there's no one to take over, their only option is to sell, and it is usually to a developer because there's no one to take over. So perhaps it's something, for the future governments to think about who takes over these lands if we want to keep that good soil and production. So, but thank you.
I agree. I'll just point out one thing that I didn't say before. So this land tax, if you're over 65, you can defer it. So, we appreciate that a lot of people over 65 have cash flow challenges, and we would not want to impact upon that. So they can defer it until until their estate changes hands, and then it gets paid at that point.
Right. So if it changes hands, does that mean a backlog of tax would then go on to the children?
Yeah, but they're only talking about 0.75% of the land value, not the whole value of the property. So so there would be a small, inheritance tax, I suppose, or when it gets sold, there'd be a small tax paid then at 0.75% annualized on the value of just the land. And we have a really good land valuing system here in New Zealand, one of the best in the world, through the way that we do rates. So, we're utilising that system that's already set up, makes it easy.
Oh, Naomi, I will disagree with you on that one. Our rate system is nowhere near. I've got it coming from a real estate background in the past. I know of people's property. They sit behind nobody from council comes out to look at the land. They work behind a computer and add that on, and then it increases the rates. And it's like, well, how is that actually being, if someone's not physically coming out to look at it, how can you make that call?
Well, and again, that's the problem, right? That is exactly the problem that we're trying to fix. That for decades, if you look at the graphs under both National and Labour, our house prices, and particularly relative to wages, have gone like that, literally gone through the roof. And that's not, you look in Germany, if you look in Germany, they've gone kind of like that. They're kind of like,
right.
So we want to fix that. We want to stabilize that house price market, both for mortgages and rent payers, to stabilize it, to make housing affordable for future generations. And you're right, the land prices have gone through the roof. It's become unaffordable for ratepayers as well. And that needs stabilizing. And the way to do it is to, incentivize investments, these big investment, some very rich people investing in property. And we want those people to go and invest in the productive economy.
No, thank you so much. It's a bit of a side passion project of mine, but no, I really appreciate you going into that deep dive. Thank you for that. But bringing it back to play to what we're about here today. And I think, you've already mentioned it earlier about, creating child-friendly cities and safe cities for children. What is your party's position on, every city in Aotearoa becoming a play-friendly place?
I mean, that would be a vision. I think that's a future generations type vision. You know, when we consider future generations, what do they want? And the opportunity to play freely and safely is a big part of the future generations vision for children. You know, I always talk about what do children need? Again, at that fundamental level, they need a variety of experiences in situations and settings within the warmth and of reciprocal relationships. Now, in the early years, that's within the warmth of a one-to-one, you know, warm, developed relationship, you know, not a stranger, right? But then as they grow older, they want to play with each other. And those relationships aren't always warm, but they learn through that, right? They learn through that sort of argy-bargy of childhood development. If I treat you like this, you don't want to play with me anymore. So maybe I will change my ways, you know? So it's really important. So for sure, that would be one of an aspect of the. I guess I like the way that the future generations did their in Wales created their strategy and policies, which was around citizen involvement in the design of that. So you know, we're a party that advocates for citizens' assemblies. I don't know if you know about citizens' assemblies. It's like you randomly select people who represent your population, you bring them together and inform them on a topic. So in this case, you know, the importance of play-based learning or free play for children. And then they discuss and debate and question, go back to their communities, have conversations. It's like jury service, but you can chat to your mates, come back and, you know, have more discussion. And provide recommendations. And the important part is that those recommendations are then binding to the decision makers. And I think that's the gap in New Zealand, and that's why we want to establish this anti-corruption commission, go, what's going on here? We know there's a lot of lobbying, it's not even registered, there's a whole lot of stuff going on, that's not cool. So that kind of approach. So I'm not one to say, hey, if we, you know, have a future generations commission, it must have play. But if when communities come together, they will say, hey, play is an important part of child development. So we need that to be a you know, an aspect of what we're looking for towards our future cities. Absolutely.
Yeah, I think those citizen assemblies are quite important because, you know, we know that it comes from good intention. Adults will come together and say, we need this for children and tamariki around our country. This is what they want. But sometimes it's come from a place where what we think, it's not necessarily what the children are thinking, and what the children want might actually be completely different. So that utilization of the youth voice is really important. And so would you look to advocate and include that youth voice in those citizen assemblies?
Yeah, I would. I mean, they're definitely important part of the demographic, but also I know of research that also, not just you, I assume you're talking about rangatahi and, you know, the sort of the teenage years, but also the children, right? As you say, children know what they want and they're really open and honest about saying what they need. And so why are we not listening to them? Absolutely, the children should be involved in the conversation too, for sure.
Oh, that's brilliant to hear, because I think that is one thing that we really underutilize. I think we're trying to get better across various departments across the country, but we need to start using that youth voice more. You know, they're not given the credit that they really have, and they do know what they want. But no, thank you for sharing that. And I guess, you know, as we come to the end of our interview, one of our final questions, you know, if your party is elected into government in October, you know, we're talking 4 weeks away now from election date, is the top party prepared to work with Play Aotearoa towards a play future for our tamariki and rangatahi across Aotearoa?
So the short answer is yes, of course.
Brilliant.
I want to just explain our pathway to Parliament, because I think for the Opportunities Party, a lot of people hear about the concept of a wasted vote. If everyone in 2017 had voted for top who wanted to vote for top, we would have got 7 or 8% of the vote at that point. But then everyone hears about this wasted vote and goes, oh, I better not. And so at that point, 2017, 7 or 8% of people wanted to vote for top. So that's sad that they didn't. But anyway, Our pathway, and this is again the way that politics is working in New Zealand, which against the recommendations of the Electoral Commission from 2012. This is the sort of stuff we're up against. But what? So therefore, we have to play the game. So what we're planning to do is get Raf, our leader in Ireland. Now, Raf has been a city councillor twice. He's been involved in the Student Volunteer Army. He was involved in the aftermath of the mosque attacks. He was involved in the Christchurch rebuild after the earthquakes. He has a very high profile in his electorate down in Ireland and Christchurch. And so that when he gets in, every other party vote around the country will count towards getting more people in. And, I'm the education sort of policy advisor in the background. I say a lot, I'm giving a lot of advice, and I'm being listened to. So even if it wasn't me, the others are really good at listening to, okay, what's the research, what's the expertise, what's the advice? And I'm quite good at doing the research. And so I got a PhD in, it's about community, it was about concepts of home. So community, belongingness, identity construction, which is such an important part of this conversation that we're having. How do children get a sense of who they are within their surrounds and with the people that they're interacting with? So different context, but crosses over. So the short answer is yes. They, even if I'm not in, they'll still be listening to me. And when Raf gets in, every party vote will count. So do party vote top.
Naomi, thank you so much for your time today. I have had an absolute pleasure talking to you. I know we got a little bit off track towards the end there, but I really enjoyed it. And I know when we share this with our members and our social media following, they'll enjoy it too. So thank you so much for your time, and best of luck moving forward with the elections in 4 weeks' time. And look forward to building a relationship in the future.
Thank you. Thank you very much. And thanks very much for having me on.
No worries. Have a great day, Naomi.
Okay. Bye.
Bye.